can't run, I can't fight. Oh, that's right. Awa will provide. Yeah? So where was Awa? Where was Awa when our son...
Jake! I'm in this place where I have nothing. Not my people, not my forest. Even my father's bow is gone. All I have is my faith that this is the Great Mother's plan.
Hello and welcome to a special episode of the Hollywood Reporters Behind the Screen, in partnership with 20th Century Studios, featuring artisans who helped to create Avatar, Fire and Ash from the Oscar-winning filmmaker James Cameron. I'm your host, THR contributing editor Stacey Wilson-Hunt. My guests today are editors Stephen Rivkin and Jason Gaudio. Welcome, gentlemen. How are you two?
Hi, thank you for having us.
Great, thank you.
Of course, and congratulations on Fire and Ash. I know, which essentially was a long movie because you shot it alongside Way of Water, but it does feel like a very distinct new chapter in the Avatar legacy. How does it feel to know that it's about to be unveiled to the world? I found it totally stunning, personally.
It's amazing that we've gotten to another milestone. Jason and I have been on since Avatar 1. Jason was an assistant back then and was an additional editor on Way of Water and is now receiving full editor credit on Fire and Ash. So very proud of him. And
wow, congratulations, Jason.
It's all nearly 20 years now. So
you've graduated.
Yes, he's graduated.
If you work hard enough, you can make it.
I love
and
that.
We're representing a team of editors, including Jim Cameron and Nick DeToth. And sadly, we lost John Rafua 5 months after Avatar 2 was released. And on Avatar 2, 10 months before the release, we lost, tragically, David Brenner. So it's been a real challenge between these incredible, devastating losses and COVID and everything else. We did have to learn how to work remotely, which changed our workflow. I've also made trips back and forth to New Zealand, and Jim has been traveling back and forth to the States. So we've had a real global post-production.
Wow.
But editing starts very early on these films. The performance capture happened over an 18-month period for Avatar 2 and 3. And we were there at the very beginning, reviewing the dailies of the performances with Jim, making selections and building a performance edit. During the capture, there are infrared cameras that are capturing their movement and facial cameras capturing every facial expression. But we have video reference of those performances, and there are a number of cameras on the set. So we have a record of what's being captured. And that's what we use to edit the first pass of the film.
Can I ask a quick question? I'm so sorry to interrupt. First of all, I wanted to say I'm so sorry for the losses you experienced on your team. That must have been very difficult. So again, my condolences. But can you contextualize a little bit for our listeners just how rare it is for editors to be this involved this early on? Because I've interviewed numerous editors over the years. I've never heard of an editor being on set watching the performances. So just maybe contextualize that a little bit.
The editor and director are involved from the get-go. So the film is essentially edited 2 times. So first in capture, and then when the actors have gone away, basically the actors are played back with their idealized performances, the very best from everyone. And that's when the virtual camera process begins. And it starts with something called a template. And this is a lower res version, a proxy, if you will, of what the shot will be when it's finished. But that's what gets delivered to Weta. Everything is locked in terms of the cutting to the frame and the lighting and the environments, the props, the wardrobe, the makeup. All of that is determined in the template phase. And once it goes to Weta, all of the high-res detail of those elements are fully realized, including the final detail in the facial performances of all of the actors. So in the template, it's somewhat crude, and we can see their eyes, we can see mouth moving. It is only a representation of what that performance is. And when it's fully realized in the final render at Weta, you see the performance that you picked sometimes years before in the performance capture. And it's really amazing to see those original choices come back in the final renders. And so Jason was very much involved in the initial QC process of doing what we call rough camera pass. And a lot of things were being worked out in preparation for the final virtual camera. Jason, you want to talk about that?
And in this context, QC is quality control, I'm assuming that's what we're saying.
Quality
Okay,
control,
just making sure I know.
Yeah. So as Steve was saying, during the performance capture, we do a performance edit that's based on performance only because there's no cameras yet. So once we do that and we turn over our camera loads, they process them and they make little chunks of pieces of the scene, which we then play back during camera. And what we do is Richie Bainham, who's the visual effects supervisor and second unit virtual director, he will bring the load up and he'll check for the environment, the lighting, the motion of creatures, of vehicles, and check that the performance of the actors is coming through true. So during that process, we'll have our VFX supervisors of sequence teams for each scene, because they assign teams to every scene because there's so much work involved in each scene. And if he gives notes, there might be a half an hour's worth of notes, there might be a day's worth of notes. They'll take it off stage and they'll work on the notes and we'll bring up the next scene. We usually have multiple scenes queued up when we're doing RCPs, which is rough camera pass. So I'll use that acronym. And what's great about it is it's a very small crew. It's the camera operator, an editor, an assistant editor, stage operator, and the supporting visual effects team. When Richie shoots and he saves a take, or Jim, it's 3 to 5 minutes and the render's in, the assistant editor's brought it into the Avid and puts it in a timeline and I can start cutting. So as he's shooting, I'm assembling the scene. We're looking at it back and forth together. So there's a feedback loop that's pretty instantaneous.
I could interrupt real quick, just on this QC pass, do you have the opportunity to make adjustments and reshoot and redo anything when you're sensing that there may be issues or you've missed something?
Absolutely. We can, he's giving technical notes for the visual effects quality if there's something wrong with the data, or if we choose to do an alternate performance, we can just swap an actor out within the load pretty live.
So this is distinct. And again, the traditional editors I've spoken to doing that assembly, you are doing this in real time, essentially. You're editing along the way.
Exactly. Where, usually you would wait and you'd be cutting the dailies from yesterday. That's the traditional way to edit a film. When you stay up the camera, you're just making sure that you get all the dailies in from yesterday. On Avatar, cutting up the camera is cutting up to 5 minutes ago. So as the shots are coming in, you're assembling the scene and I'm working with Richie, or you can be working with Jim, whoever's operating, and he can look at the cut and he can say, oh, if I change this camera just a little bit, or I want to emphasize something else, we can do either alt patterns, or he can just keep improving the cut live. So when you're put the camera down and you feel like you're done with the scene, you don't have to wait for a cut. Right away that you have it. And we'll be shipping scenes to Jim daily. And he'll look at that and he'll then schedule a review with us. And he'll either give us notes to reshoot something, or if we're lucky, it's close enough, and he'll take it and he'll reshoot the cameras and re-edit the scene with again an editor on stage with him. So it loops with me and Richie, and then it'll loop again with Jim and another editor. And then when Jim says the scene is done, it goes to Weta.
And that must be the best feeling ever when Jim says we can move on, right?
when he accepts it, you met the bar.
Stephen, I'd love to know, speaking of Jim's role as an editor, not all directors are editors. And Jim of course, has an incredible acuity at so many different roles. How does it make your job easier, being the fact that he is an editor, that he shoots with an editor's eye? How does that impact your process, Stephen?
Well, Jim has an amazing eye and a great sense of pace and story, and he knows what he wants. I would explore cutting patterns. He always wants to see variations of how you would cut any given scene. And he would explore, when he shoots, he will shoot alternate patterns. We may have an A, B, C pattern for how a scene would be cut. And he appreciates the alt patterns to explore everything that he shot. And when he's shooting, he gets ideas, because we're interacting with him, or Nick on the stage in New Zealand, or if I'm there, we'll work with him on the stage when he's shooting final virtual cameras. And he will explore different paths. He may go down one path that requires a whole different set of shots to complete the edit of a scene. And he'll analyze everything that he's done to find the best way to tell the story within that scene. But I do want to digress a little bit and talk about the innovation of uncoupling the actor's performance from the shot creation, because this is unique to the Avatar films. And one of the things that happens is Jim works directly with the actors during capture. They work through the scenes, and the actors are using their imagination because they're basically acting in an empty volume, an empty stage. There's no environment. There are no sets. There are crude props that they will hold. There's limited wardrobe that they'll wear just to give a sense
It almost,
of what...
to me, looks like theater. When I see some of the BTS footage, it looks like they're almost on a stage doing theater, which I find really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, Sigourney once said it's the purest form of acting. It's like black box acting. And I give a lot of credit to them for just being in the moment. And what they do as performers is truly extraordinary.
Agreed.
But,
right.
and that reference of their faces is what we basically live by, because the accuracy of their performance is preserved through the whole process. It's very important that all these reference cameras show close-ups of every character in the scene, because that goes all the way through to Weta. And Jim uses it as a check to see how accurate the performance is being reproduced on the CG model. The amazing thing about virtual camera is that you don't have to worry about, this actor's best take was in the wide shot, and I really wish I had a close-up of that, because any performance could be a close-up, or a wide shot, or a medium shot, or a crane shot. It doesn't matter.
So you have that flexibility in that moment to decide where the best shot is and which framing is best for that moment.
Right. And virtual camera, if we could go revisit a scene later, play it back, and shoot it differently, even a capture of a moment to change a line or a part of a scene, we can go process that in performance and then change it later. So there's a lot of flexibility to be able to manipulate. Like, for example, a scene came out and we needed to take an important line that was in that scene and put it in a scene that remained in the film. I mean, there's an amazing freedom in that flexibility.
So essentially, you don't have the same onus of ADR that a traditional feature may have for actors to come back after the fact, having to redo some of their audio on a soundstage. You're sort of cataloging all these moments that you can use if you need them.
Well, we actually do have something like ADR, but we call it FPR, which is a facial performance replacement. So the actor can come back. If we needed to change a line, put on the head rig, which has the camera and microphone in it, and deliver a new line, and it can be inserted into that scene.
That is absolutely incredible. I need 10 years to learn about all these nuances. This is really stunning.
We've had nearly 20 and we're still learning. So there you go.
So speaking of that time period, Jason, I'd like to know, how has editing technology most changed since you started this journey on Avatar?
Well, the tools haven't evolved that much. We started out with an Avid. It's the technology that's evolved. On Avatar 1, it was pretty much the same technique, but we had a lot less CG characters than this one. And now we can get, I can't, do you remember how many we could have in a volume on the first one, Steve?
I think it
It was
was
like
maybe
7 or something.
six
Yeah,
or eight.
8. And now we can have 20. And so, as an editor, to have 20 characters in a volume simultaneously, there's a lot more to look at and to use. But the technique is pretty much the same. So it's just gotten more refined, and we're just getting better at it, really.
And do you use AI tools at all in this process? I know obviously you don't use AI to create the film, but on your end, just from the editing perspective, no. Oh, wow.
We don't use any AI at all. Jim is really adamant about everything being reality based. Um, it's all about the actors, and it's all about the performances that those actors are giving us. With performance, I'm always impressed when I watch a performance edit that the technology really just melts away in a way, and I get so immersed in the emotion of what the actors are doing. I will lose track of their suits and the dots and the face rigs and everything. And you really know a scene is working when it can bring tears to your eyes or, shocks you during a fight. And I just think it's a great process. And the technology is just a tool to get back to the basics of telling a great story and letting those performances come through.
It really is an incredible confluence of old school craftsmanship and just stunning visuals. And I'm with you. When I watch Zoe Saldana's performance in these movies, I can feel her heart emanating from the screen, the emotion in her voice. It really is truly spectacular.
And the beautiful part of that is if you had watched the pre-cut of it when it wasn't CG, you'd feel those same emotions.
Right. And when you see the behind the scenes footage of her filming, you're like, oh, this is why it's so good.
That's why it's so good, because it's the performance. Right. Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Stephen, I was delighted to read that one of your early feature editing gigs was on My Cousin Vinny. Is this true? Can you confirm this for me?
Yes, and it was quite an experience. Very much a fun project to work on.
Well, I'm curious what you learned, and this is, of course, 1992, Marissa Tomei's Oscar-winning supporting actress role. What did you learn about levity and comedy making that movie? Because I do have to say there are some very funny moments in Avatar that I think give us a little moment of reprieve amidst all the action and the stress of the story. What did you learn about the importance of levity and comedy, even in a very drama-heavy story?
Well, I've had a number of experiences with comedic films. One of my first big breaks in Hollywood was to work with the great Mel Brooks on Robin Hood Men in Tights. And
yes, the classic.
Yeah. And I learned a lot about comedy from one of the comedy greats. I think most dramas have comedy elements to them. I don't think, even if it's a drama, there are always the things that break the mood and give an audience comic relief to a very dramatic situation. I think films like My Cousin Vinny obviously is more comedic throughout. But Jim, he always has elements of humor in every one of his films, even though they may not be considered comedy. And it really does help to break the ice when people are in a tense moment. And a lot of times there are moments where you need that. I worked with Norman Jewison on 4 different films, and he told me the story of In the Heat of the Night, when they did In the Heat of the Night, and he worked with the editor, the great Hal Ashby, who became a director.
Of course, yes.
Actually, Norman hired him to direct his first film. And when they previewed In the Heat of the Night, the audience was laughing at Rod Steiger talking to Sidney Poitier in the office when he would chew his gum. And Norman was very disturbed. And Hal said, they need the comic relief because it's a very tense scene. So there are times when an audience is on the edge of their chair, and sometimes they need to laugh because it's such a tense situation.
What incredible education for you so early on.
I was very privileged to work with some great directors and have that in my background.
That's really excellent. And I can see that through all of Jim's work too. Even Terminator, pretty intense storyline, but there are some very funny moments. I think there has
Absolutely.
to be, right?
Absolutely.
Jason, when you look at the work that you've been able to do in all your different roles, but also more recently, is there a moment, and can you even pick a moment or a scene or a sequence that you look back on now when you see it in its final form and think, wow, that was really tough to assemble and it looks even better than you hoped? Can you even parse out a moment like that?
Well, they're all tough to assemble.
Right.
But I've worked on a lot of scenes. One scene that stands out for me was in Avatar 2 when Loak wakes up on Pyakon and has his whole interaction with him and ends up befriending him in that scene, and it ends with them kind of holding hands in a sense. And once you see it in the full CG world, that really made me feel like it's a beautiful, big cinematic scene.
And Stephen, what has your experience been like watching the movie with an audience? And speaking of sort of those unexpected laughs or different reactions, were there moments where people reacted in a way that surprised you?
Having come from the experience of testing both full comedy films and mixed drama comedies, you want the laughs that are intended. What you don't want is the unintended laughs where it's like, oh my God, that didn't play quite right,
Right.
So I'm very sensitive to seeing a film with an audience for the first time and pleasantly surprised, I would say. On this film, a lot of the things I wasn't sure were going to work comedically did. Again, it was a great icebreaker. So the first time with an audience is very much a learning experience and a confirmation of the choices that we've made.
That's great. And you're right. You definitely don't want the laughs in the wrong places, right?
Right. The unintentional laughs are not desired.
No. And in closing, sort of reflecting on the work that you've done with Jim across this incredible series, what do you think your biggest lessons have been in how he has changed the way you look at filmmaking and editing specifically? Or is there something that you've taken with you onto other projects that you feel, wow, Jim really changed my perspective on that? Maybe Jason, you can start.
Well, I've worked with Jim on multiple films as assistants, and on Avatar 1, I sat with him in every single editorial and visual effects review and just learned so much about the technical side of it, but that it's story and it's emotion that really drive a movie. The visual effects are almost just kind of a byproduct of it. You really want to touch the audience's heart and make sure that the storyline is never lost. And it's not about the spectacular visual effects. It's about, in this particular movie, it's about family and their journey through this. So it's all about story. More so, you'd think he's about visual effects, but it's mainly about story. And so I always try and keep that in mind when I'm editing a scene.
That's really great. How about you, Stephen?
Well, Jim is an amazing filmmaker, a visionary. We're so fortunate to go on this journey with him over the many, many years. And I think we're all in awe of his genius in coming up with these stories. His imagination is just beyond belief. And I just really think that we've learned so much along the way in the technology, but that's, as Jason said, just secondary. When you take all of the amazing visuals away, it is still about storytelling. We're making a movie, but the actors are wearing CG instead of makeup, so it's really comes down to putting a movie together ultimately in the same way you'd put any movie together.
I just also wanted to mention that we have 2 editing rooms on 2 continents, one in Los Angeles and one in Wellington. And we have an amazing team. We have 2 first assistants, Ben and Liz. Without their help, we couldn't have made this movie. They're managing terabytes of media for us. And Justin Shaw and his visual effects team turned over 3,500 visual effects and tracked them. They all did an amazing job, and I just wanted to thank them.
Wow. Truly stunning. I could listen to this for 20 more years and again, probably wouldn't scratch the surface of what you've been able to accomplish. But huge congratulations to the both of you. I can't wait for fans to see your work on the big screen this season.
Thank you so much for having us.
Great, thank you.
I'd like to thank Jason and Stephen for joining me in this special episode of the Hollywood Reporters Behind the Screen. Tune in for more conversations with other artisans from Avatar, Fire, and Ash. I'm Stacey Wilson Hunt. Thank you so much for listening.